Story number 1. When I was 19, a stranger tried to get me into his van after I got off work. When that encounter occurred, I was 19 years old and I had just closed the store I was working at with another coworker. They drove home, and since I lived just across the street, I thought I was safe to walk home alone. After all, it's just a 2-minute walk to my apartment. The apartment I lived in had an auto shop below the building, which my uncle owned. This is important info, trust me. It was exactly around 9:30 at night, so it was pretty dark out, and the roads were empty. Not even 10 seconds after I walked across the street, a dark blue minivan pulls up beside me out of nowhere. This kinda startled me, so I looked at the driver in confusion. I was carrying some bags of stuff I bought from work, and the guy driving the van noticed and asked if I needed a ride. I kindly declined his offer and just told him I just live a few minutes away, and so I started continue walking. But the guy started slowly following me and continued, "Are you sure you don't need a ride? I mean, I don't mind." He asked again, and I declined and continued to keep walking. But he was persistent, and this literally started to creep me out, so I started walking faster and ignored him as he'd repeatedly say things like, "Come on, get in my car. Come on, get in the car. Get in the car. Come on, get in." I was afraid to run inside the apartment because I really didn't want this creep to know where I lived, so I was gonna just look back around the building to lose him. Thankfully, I noticed that the auto shop's lights were on and the garage door was open. My uncle must have been working late in the shop, so I speed walked towards the open garage and the van sped off in a hurry as soon as they were about to pass by the open garage door. I told my uncle about what just happened and waited a few minutes before walking back out to get into my apartment. I locked all my doors and windows and stayed in the living room until my dad came home from our cousin's house. Thankfully, I never saw the van again. I did finally buy some pepper spray after this incident. I usually always had my weighted pocket knife on me, but I had actually left it at home that day after using it to cut thick string for some crafts I was working on. To everyone, even if you only have to walk 2 minutes to get to your destination, even if you think you're safe, please treat it like it is a 20-minute walk home at night in a really sketchy town. Always be on high guard and continue with caution when going anywhere alone. If you at all don't feel safe walking alone and you have anyone like friends or family that you know you can trust that wouldn't mind giving you a ride or even tag along with you, don't be afraid to ask because it might just save your life. Story number 2. How my mother almost got dragged into a van. It was around 8 p.m. in the late 70s, early 80s in communist Romania. My mother was playing on the street alone. All of the kids were inside their houses. Then, my mother saw a group of men coming in her direction. They approached her, asking her, "Where is the X street?" My mom didn't think a lot about it as she was young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and she called the men to follow her. Now, the men knew where the street was. At least, this is what my mother thinks now. They asked her if she knew a shortcut, which she replied with yes. That shortcut led to their van. When she reached the street, she saw the van, but there wasn't anything that she could do, except, of course, screaming. The men tried to pull her into the van, but she started screaming, and right then a neighbor appeared. When the man saw him, they ran and left my mom alone. Then, the neighbor made sure that my mom went home safely. These days, I asked my mother why does she think that the men wanted to kidnap her. She told me that back in the day, there were people who would kidnap children, kill them, and bathe their blood. I was pretty skeptical about the last statement, but who knows what goes through some people's mind. Luckily, my mother was saved. Since then, she told me that she never followed any stranger anywhere, no matter how polite you look. Story number 3. White van at 4 a.m. I was walking back home from my partner's pub. It was around 4 a.m. I'm a 27-year-old female and had gotten near the top of the hill we live on in the UK. I'd stuck to a lot of areas and shared my location with my fiancé the entire time. As I was walking, I heard a honk behind me, which caused me to jump, and I watched as a white van pulled up about 2 meters in front of me and stopped. I stopped too, watching them. They put their hazards on. Then they began to slowly roll backwards towards me. I began walking backwards and quickly called my fiancé, by which time they hurriedly pulled away. He stayed on the phone as I explained what happened, almost in tears, until I reached our flat and got inside. Story number 4. Weird white van encounter at 0200. I was 15 at the time. Due to stress and recent mildly traumatic events, I felt a really strong need to get out of my house and ended up booking it at 0200 to a large willow tree at the edge of my neighborhood. On the way there, I passed by a large white van. It was parked near a family acquaintance's house, within view of the tree. Either the van's lights were on, or a light inside the van was. But I didn't look in. I was panicking so bad, and just wanted to get to the tree. So I got to the tree, climbed in, eventually calmed down and started to go home. Before I left, I took a flash photo of the tree with my phone. I was having a really cringy photography phase. I was in view of the van at that point and the flash was bright as hell, and nearly immediately the van books it out of the neighborhood, speeding and everything. I honestly didn't think much of it at the time as I was still out of it, but looking back, that's a bit odd, right?